Hi there, and welcome to Help Solve the Case. Guess what? She is back. After we thought we saw the last of Karen Reed, she is back with a civil suit against the Massachusetts State Police and the town of Canton. And you know as well as I do how much I love the cop stuff. It should be very interesting. So stay tuned and get my unique expert perspective on what she's saying the police did wrong. God only knows. I watched the trial. This was very interesting to me. You know, she's a quasi celebrity. She could even be considered a celebrity. And do you or do you not feel justice was done in the case, in the murder case? Now we're going to get to the nitty-gritty in the civil case. So it should be very interesting. Thanks for being here. I really would appreciate it if you would like, subscribe, and share. It helps me do more for so many and get to my goal of providing more donated services to identify unknown humans and suspects in criminal cases. So thanks for being here. Here we go. Okay, so this was filed June 4th in the civil court. Now, this is a civil case, and the rules are a little bit different in a civil case as opposed to a criminal case. In a civil case, it's a preponderance of the evidence, it's a 51%. Okay, it's not beyond a reasonable doubt. And we're going to read the complaint here. The complaint is what they say happened and what they're asking for. So should be a doozy. I started to read the first sentence and I was like, "Oh my goodness." Okay. Um so one, this is the introduction. They're going to give us the background, which many of us know, but maybe you don't. The not guilty verdict in Commonwealth versus Karen Reed on June 18th, 2025. So you typically have, and I'm not sure in Massachusetts what the law is, but typically you have many times in a civil case, you have just a year. So from June 18th to this was filed on what, June 4th. Okay. You have to preserve, or sometimes you have to file a notice of claim. How do I know that? I've served a lot of those as a process server, and I've written some of those. Okay. Not immune to a lawsuit myself. Love the law. Let's get at it. Okay. That's what I say. Like, okay, let's go. All right. So, the not guilty verdict in Commonwealth versus Karen Reed did not merely end in a wrongful prosecution. It shone an unflinching spotlight on something the Massachusetts State Police, hereafter known as MSP, and the Town of Canton Police Department, CPD, have spent years trying to conceal. Ooh, this is spicy. Sorry. An embedded culture of bigotry, misogyny, systemic failures, and institutional rot. Oh my goodness. I'm sorry. This is like at the very core of both organizations. And I have to interrupt myself here because yours truly still is 5'2", blonde. Okay. I started out as a baby girl in the police department. And these words are probably not the first time that I've heard them, and not that I've been asked about them. Did I receive good treatment? Yes. Did I receive horrible treatment? Yes. But we'll save that for a cocktail hour or a live Zoom sometime. And maybe a book. Maybe, I love highlighting. I referenced in one of my books some of the good guys, but I haven't gotten to the bad guys yet. So maybe we need to write that book. But for right now, we're going to see what's happened here, and those are some very, very strong words: bigotry, misogyny, systemic failures, and institutional rot. Mm-mm-mm. Okay. As a result of this entrenchment, Miss Reed now files this action against MSP and CPD for their negligent hiring. Here's the keywords, folks. I learned as a supervisor when I took my supervisor training, negligent hiring, negligent training, and it doesn't say negligent retention, but that's another one too, okay? And negligent supervision based on biased and corrupt police officers whose actions violated her constitutional rights and caused her immense harm. Now, I've also been talking about some stuff. Hopefully you guys can't hear that. They're running the air blower. Hopefully you guys can't hear that. It's driving me crazy. They're doing the lawn. But there's something in law enforcement. When you follow a direct order or you act as a police department within the SOP, I'm referring to some of the stuff that's recently happened in the Nancy Guthrie case to the journalists and the arrests and stuff like that, the sheriff, drama. But, and I spoke on that. In the police department, you have standard operating procedure, which usually, if you have a very big one, okay, like some of the agencies in the metro area, Metro Phoenix area, where I live, typically you get a new rule when somebody fudged something up, okay? And they get expanded to cover problems, okay? Don't do that again. Here's what you should do instead, right? And so when you have these SOPs and these general orders that come down from on high, you as a police officer have to follow them or you can get in trouble and you can get fired. So the police officer has to make the decision, sometimes for themselves, okay, based on their training and whatever, how they're going to act. Do I arrest somebody? Do I not arrest somebody? Do I reveal this? Do I not reveal this? How they do their job. And at the same time, they're trying to stay within the guidelines. They're trying to stay within these orders, direct orders from supervision, okay, those general orders, those SOPs, as we call them, those general orders, those are orders. You violate them, you could be fired. You lose your job. You lose your career. Your kids can go hungry. You don't have medical insurance. You can get demoted. All right? That's a pretty serious thing. But many times they forget to balance it against civil rights. Now, this is against the institution. This lawsuit is against the institution, not the individual officers. But you got some civil rights and some civil cases, not criminal. Sometimes you get criminal, but civil rights and civil cases that we're talking about here. And some officers worry too much about the general order and not about the civil consequences, okay? So bad actions, and I'm not saying anything happened here. We're reading this document, but bad actions can have bad consequences for the cop too, also, okay? Just saying that. All right. So they're saying here, she's saying here, Karen Reed's attorneys are saying that they, both MSP and CPD, negligently hired, okay? Speaking of Nancy Guthrie, negligent hiring, okay? Which means qualifications, background, all that stuff. Negligent training. Where did training come up? Where did training come up? Derek Chauvin case. Now, whether that's right or wrong, or you support Derek, that's a whole nother cocktail hour about that case, okay? But these are the areas: negligent hiring, negligent training, and negligent supervision. They forgot retention, okay? Because many agencies keep the officers. When bad boo-boos happen, they keep the officers, and that's negligent retention, okay? And then you have this supervision, negligent supervision with bias and corrupt police officers who they're probably going to allege MSP and CPD knew were violating her rights. And that's like super, super awkward and potentially liable. It also says it caused her immense harm. Okay? At the heart of Miss Reed's claims lies a distressing narrative. One not just about individual rights, but about fundamental principles upon which our society is built. Well, could that be integrity? Could that be having to do with the oath of office? Through this action, the MSP and CPD will now be forced to answer for their police officers' unlawful conduct against Miss Reed that is set forth in detail below. These words, I'm sorry, but also for for the insidious culture of bigotry and misogyny. These are big words, folks, that fostered such unlawful conduct and has likely resulted in other unconstitutional criminal investigations. Oh my goodness. Pandora's box is potentially open, in which countless unknown others have also suffered. I'm having flashbacks, y'all. I'm having some flashbacks. Watch out, folks. Indeed, the MSP and CPD have avoided facing this very moment for years. But now it's time for the long-awaited transparency and accountability owed to the citizens of this Commonwealth. Okay, let's peel back the layer of what she's saying. Oh, former MSP Detective Michael Proctor, hereinafter referred to as Proctor, and former, as of 2 days ago, CPD Sergeant Sean Goode, oh my goodness, these words, I'm sorry, are virulent, I can't even say that, virulent, like a virus, bigots, virulent bigotry, whose hatred for anyone and whose hatred for anyone and everyone different from themselves permeates their every action. And let me interrupt here, because even though they quit and even though she's not coming after them that I'm not aware of, maybe they're protected, maybe they have immunity. Some states have immunity for officers as individuals. The department, here's some other words, knew or should have known. Those get thrown about in lawsuits all the time. Knew or should have known that this bigotry and whatever's going on here. They, she says, are not officers who occasionally voice an offensive remark. They are men whose written and recorded communications sent to one another and to a circle of like-minded friends over the course of a decade. I don't know. Did they get their phones for 10 years? I don't know. Established, entrenched, and unrepentant hatred, goodness gracious, for women, Black Americans, Asian Americans, Jews, Hispanics, Arabs, and gay people. And again, this is Karen Reed's lawsuit. This is not my words. I mean, you're getting some of my feedback and my commentary, but you're reading it right here, okay? So this is not me saying it. Their unfitness for any position of public trust was not subtle. So that sounds to me, it should have been noticeable. Knew or should have known. It was extensively documented. Uh-oh. Like, as a police administrator, you're going, oh, really? And as set forth below, knowable to MSP and CPD long before either agency assigned them to investigate and prosecution of Miss Reed. Could there be, here's some other terms, a pattern of misconduct? Okay. Oh, as a city official, you're like, oh goodness. It's like, when a doctor comes at you with a big needle or something, you're like, oh my God, how bad is that gonna hurt? Okay. Like you're going, the city officials are going, like these words are like, oh goodness. Okay. It's like, how big is the bat that's coming at them? Okay. Proctor and Goode's involvement at the outset of the investigation into the death of John O'Keefe III invariably and irredeemably contaminated it in every respect. Okay. Oh, goodness. Here we go. Here's the details as she alleges it. As depicted in thousands of written and audio messages that the Norfolk County District, oh, sorry, like I have not read this. I'm reading this just as I'm talking to you, and I see it's bad words, like horrible. I would never want to, as the agency or whatever, like this is as a supervisor, like this is like not good. As depicted in thousands of written and audio messages that the Norfolk County District Attorney's Office has thus far hidden from public view. Is that the Brady List? Goodness gracious. And far from the, quote, inclusive values, end quote, that both organizations publicly claim to pursue, Proctor and Goode secretly and proudly wore badges of hate. Oh, that's terrible. And we have a subscript here. Multiple copies of a thumb drive containing a selection of the audio recordings referenced herein are attached as Exhibit 1. Oh, God. Okay. Y'all, I don't like bad cops. And again, I don't know if they're bad cops. I don't know if what Karen is saying is true. This is awful. I mean, I'm smiling, I'm laughing, I'm intrigued by this language, but it's not good. No cop likes this. No good cop likes a bad lawsuit. No cop likes a lawsuit. No cop likes anybody talking crap against them. And then if it's true, this is awful. This is awful. If you've worked as a cop and you know what it takes day to day to do the job, and then to have this garbage, okay? And I don't know if it's true or not true. It's just, this is not good in any way, shape, or form. But is it interesting in the civil, now we're in I was going to say the criminal justice system, but the civil justice system, is it interesting because of this whole spectacle? Absolutely it is. Because let me tell you, I feel personally, we need some better behavior in the United States. We do. We do. And I know we have bad cops. And to me personally, unacceptable. Unacceptable. Like I said, I'm having flashbacks from my career. From my career. I was in it. I was in it. So this is, yeah. Sorry. Like, it's terrible. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I signed up for. This is not what I got up and put on my uniform. I put on my badge every day and went out there and risked my darn life. And it wasn't just on my shift because I worked in the town. I lived in the town where I worked. So it's 24/7, years and years and years of any time that I could have been picked off or my family members could have been picked off. Not acceptable. Not acceptable. And yes, it's easy to critique. I'm guilty of it. It's easy to critique if you haven't worn the badge and done the job and worn the shoes and the sweat and the bleeding and that I'm damaged. I've got physical damage from doing this job. But it doesn't make it right. It doesn't make it right to be a bad cop at all. So they said, indeed, bigotry guided their every act as law enforcement officers for years. But such conduct remained disguised. This is such bad language, y'all. Disguised by the uniforms they wore and obscured by the support and encouragement they received. Support and encouragement they received inside the walls of the very institutions designed to prevent such injustice and protect the public. I'm looking at this from both sides here. It's just nasty. It's just nasty all around if it's true. For the MSP and CPD who hired, trained, supervised, and observed these two for years. Oh my God. I just saw a word. Okay. Proctor's and Goode's hateful and despicable views were not only part of their own daily vernacular, words, but were woven through the fabric of their organization's culture and everyday conversations. After telling Goode about a multi-car accident in Canton, actually take your time. I saw a blank was involved, so I wouldn't rush if you're working. Let them die. My new VP is a giant malignant blank. I pray to the heavens that some blank up insect from the Amazon crawls up her vagina, hatches eggs, and the litter kills her by eating her from the inside out. Oh my goodness. And I don't know if this is true or not. If this is true, this is reprehensible. Biggest blank blank. I don't even know if I can read these. Referring to his then girlfriend's rear end. I can't even. I make every. I can't even like that. I can't even read that. Went into Canton High this morning to get a transcript and saw more blank in 10 minutes than the 4 years I spent there combined. Everywhere I looked, there was, oh my God. I can't even read these. Oh my God. I I can't read these. I mean, you could read these. Are they doing this on on city-owned um phones or computers or whatever? Indeed, throughout the course of their friendship, which dates back to high school, Goode and Proctor bonded over the warped prism through which they both view their surroundings and the individuals they encounter in their personal professional lives. These distorted worldviews were shaped by unimaginable hatred and intolerance through which they dehumanized others, often wishing violence or death on them, demeaning them, or even suggesting, quote, planting, end quote, evidence on them to cause them harm. I hope to God that's not true. And I will say, well, those statements, if they are true, and again, I don't know how they're going to formulate that applies to her. Maybe we're going to see more statements to her. Yeah, let me keep going. In written and recorded audio conversations beginning in 2013, the year MSP hired Proctor, and when Goode was already an officer with CPD, and for almost a decade later, these two law enforcement officers referred to community members whom they encountered as, I'm not reading them. You got to read them. Proctor and Goode believed these folks were polluting their neighborhoods in which they lived and worked and where they eventually served. They did more than just subscribe to and act in conformance with their bigotry. They actually memorialized it in writing and voice messages to their like-minded friends. Not a few communications, thousands of them. They discussed sharing private nude pictures of women. Is that Isn't that illegal? Is that illegal? And intentionally performing on women while they slept. Few protected classes, community members, or public figures were spared. Goode wrote about the Boston mayor. I can't read these. I can't read these. Put simply, they were then and now completely and unquestionably unfit to hold positions of authority with MSP and CPD, much less to play important roles, or in Miss Reed's case, the primary role in homicide investigations. And despite, let me interrupt myself here. Where I was trying to go before is looking at this from an objective First Amendment perspective. Did any of those comments that they made, we don't know what the SOP said about making those comments on duty, whatever, like each of those things would have to apply potentially, I'm not an attorney, to a specific investigation. So, some of that stuff is I would believe, I'm not a First Amendment attorney, to their private life and their ability to express their First Amendment opinion, albeit possibly not on the job while wearing the uniform and referring to public officials and using police phones and stuff. Now, did any of this, and I think we heard some comments or different things during the Karen Reed trial, did those comments or those biases affect Karen Reed's case personally? I think that, and again, I'm not the attorney, attorneys weigh in. I think that is going to potentially be the hurdle here. Or do we have any of these possibly protected classes, the evidence of it versus the freedom of speech, First Amendment right to have their own views? Okay. And it says here, and despite that CPD had received, reviewed, verified, and analyzed these same messages nearly a year ago, Sergeant Goode remained employed with full rank as a sworn police officer by the CPD until 2 days ago. Did he retire, or did he quit? Did he get fired? What happened? And, okay, I remember as a police officer, you had to be impartial. I remember going to a protest, having to work a protest line about a particular subject, and the supervisor said, you are here to do your job, whether you agree with what they're saying or you don't agree with what they're saying. And that cannot come into this in any way, shape, or form. You are just here to interpret the law and apply the law. Okay? So, like, you could have friends with different political persuasions or whatever, different lifestyle persuasions, different religions, all this stuff, and they do their thing and you do your thing. So, did these biases, whatever you want to call it, feelings, proclivities, opinions, beliefs, as people, as Goode and Proctor were people, did it affect their job? Okay? Because cops do have personal lives and cops do have rights to personal opinions. It just cannot affect their work. They have to be impartial, neutral. They have to apply the law across the board. So we're going to have to see how they're going to prove this here, okay? On January 29, 2022, the MSP and CPD unleashed these two misogynist bigots on Miss Reed to work on the conflicted and corrupt, quote, investigation into the death of Mr. O'Keefe. Okay, here's some allegations. It did not take long to trigger their hatred and target Miss Reed. All right. Okay. Indeed, Proctor, Goode, other police officers, and their respective organizations understood the assignment once their fellow cops and friends, Brian and Nicole Albert, Matthew and Jennifer McCabe, and Brian Higgins, parentheses, referred to as, quote, house defendants, end quote, in Miss Reed's pending federal court action. Okay, that could be another, I don't know what that is. I can look for that. Let me know. That could be another civil rights thing. Falsely reported that Mr. O'Keefe, quote, never went inside the house, end quote. Even though his face was battered and bruised, he had dog bites and scratches on his arm, and he had a severe laceration on the back of his head that could have only come from a backward fall onto a ridged surface in the house rather than a flat front lawn. And are they talking about the stairs or whatever? I'm not sure. Law enforcement began immediately targeting and framing the female outsider, Miss Reed. Okay, so that statement there. So we've heard some derogatory terms against women, the C word. Okay. Now we hear outsider, non-cop. Okay. So is it because she's a woman? Is it because she was an outsider? Like, I don't know. But look, it's in italics. Okay. As the MSP's assigned lead investigator, and without knowing any more about Miss Reed than she was an outsider and a female, Proctor openly exposed his ossified, I don't even know what that word is. Look up that word. Okay, according to the AI overview from vocabulary.com, it says ossified describes something that has hardened, turned into bone, or become so rigidly set in its ways that it is entirely unable to change or adapt. Okay, like a frozen bone, I guess. Okay. So, Proctor, according to Miss Reed, openly exposed his hardened prejudice when he described her to his group chat buddies as a, quote, retarded, end quote, whack job C, end quote, with, quote, no rear end. I'm changing the word there, end quote, that, quote, I'm not even saying that, whom they decided 16 hours into the investigation had, quote, zero chance skating, end quote. Quote, she's effed, end quote. I didn't say the exact word. Proctor intended to, quote, make the investigation cut and dry, end quote, so he and his close-knit circle friends could pin it on, quote, the girl, end quote. Okay, so 16 hours into the investigation. Is that tunnel vision? Could be. We talk about that, right? Is she saying that it was, because they said outsider, that it was, cops versus Karen and they needed to pin it on somebody? What is she trying to establish here? Immediately after Miss Reed's arrest, Goode made the same type of sexualized and dehumanizing comment about Miss Reed's medical conditions and physical appearance that he and Proctor peddled, which is like sold, in the hallways of their organizations on a daily basis. Quote, Jesus, every girl will want a brain tumor, multiple sclerosis, colitis if you can look like that in yoga pants after killing your boyfriend, end quote. Meanwhile, as Good pondered Miss Reed in yoga pants, Proctor seized Miss Reed's phone and launched immediately into a search for naked pictures of her, only to report back to his colleagues and friends disappointingly, quote, no nudes so far, end quote. But as he wrote to others as the investigation began, he, quote, hoped, end quote, that, quote, she kills herself, end quote. That's terrible. Like, I I watched the trial. I didn't get into all the precursor stuff, so I'm not aware of a lot of this alleged behavior. MSP and CPD's, quote, investigative approach, end quote, was born out of Proctor and Goode's perverse and depraved, again, semantics, perverse and depraved pattern of singling out and vilifying an outsider, again, italics, while protecting the, quote, blue line, end quote, and their families. This was, of course, made more palatable by dehumanizing Miss Reed. With the help of Goode and CPD, Proctor and his colleagues at MSP, so they're showing that two agencies and the two cops are working together, including his direct supervisor, Yuri Buchanek, conducted a fundamentally conflicted and corrupt investigation where the goal was to pin it on the girl, italics, and which included rampant violations of policies, procedures, and ethical rules. Okay, so now they're saying that they have a violation of the police policies, the policies in place. Okay, so now maybe we're looking at, maybe as private people in their personal life, they could hold these opinions, but now they're bringing it into the investigation and they're violating the department's own policies, procedures, and ethical rules. Okay, so then that liability may attach there. Okay, as opposed to First Amendment, people's right to form their own opinions and express them. If because sometimes people have, companies have social media policies, government or whatever, because you are, in some senses, and I say that gingerly, a representative of the entity, the government entity. There has to be a delineation between I'm saying this as a person and I'm saying this as a representative of the department. There could be SOP in there saying you can't, I don't want to say you can't have an opinion, but there's certain things that you can't talk about because of this job. Like people in the government, in the federal government, they can't have, what is that, Hatch Act? I don't know if it's Hatch Act or whatever. Like you can't have an opinion about ongoing things that could influence other things or whatever. So maybe that's that. Okay. For example, and as described further below, despite overwhelming evidence that Mr. O'Keefe was inside the house at 34 Fairview Road, they did not search the home for blood, fingerprints, or DNA evidence. Now, is that in there in the policies, procedures, and ethical rules? And I will challenge that. Because many departments don't have an investigative manual, and officers have their own discretion about how best to investigate. They follow hunches, okay? So that, to me, will be very interesting. Because the detective rules the investigation. And every case is different. And there is no rote, R-O-T-E, you do this, then you do this, then you do this, then you do this. Because then every case would be conducted the same, and you would waste resources potentially, and you would overlook things in different cases. So I want to see where that rule is, where that policy is. Okay, she's made a statement. She's made an allegation through her attorneys here that she has to support in order to win this case, okay? So that's one. The house was neither processed nor photographed by a forensic criminalist. So now let's talk about this. From what I saw in the trial, this with the last one, the crime scene happened outside. It did not happen inside. So you're going to process the crime scene that's outside. You're not going in someone's house if it's not a crime scene, or if you don't believe it's a crime scene, or it's not labeled as a crime scene. Does that make sense? So unless you know or you believe that it's a crime scene, and I know you guys are going to come after me in the speculation that they were hiding it and all this stuff, but I'm saying in the detective's mind, if you don't have evidence that something else was a crime scene, you're not going to waste resources. You can get in trouble calling out the cavalry for some BS that wastes time and money and lab resources, okay? So I don't know how she's going to show that there, okay? Indeed, she says, the investigators did not even walk into the crime scene house, that's what she's calling it, until a week later, and then only for a pro forma visit and brief, quote, interview, end quote, of Nicole Albert. So, is she, Karen Reed, going to get a police expert to come in and say, I believe, this is not me saying this, but the expert is going to have to say, I believe 100% that that house was a crime scene. And I believe, based on modern investigation techniques or whatever, or the policies and procedures, which I want to see if it's in there, that this house was a crime scene. Okay? She's going to have someone to say that. All right? No effort was made to secure evidence from the Alberts' German Shepherd, even though Mr. O'Keefe's body was found in the yard with fresh and obvious dog bites and scratches on his right arm. Now, I remember the testimony from the lady, from the expert, about the dog bites. And the substantiation of the expert. Okay, and maybe we need to go revisit all that testimony. It was not convincing to me, a fellow expert. Okay? So, they're going to have to, like we talk about probable cause and connecting the dots in the crime. Karen Reed here is referring to her defense and her version. Remember, we talk about our Netflix show of what the prosecution is going to put on and what the defense is going to put on. So in this civil case, she's going to have to substantiate and get these people to show that a reasonable investigator, based on these expert reports and everything and whatever. Now, remember, at the time during the investigation, not years later at the trial, and I'm not taking one side or the other, but at the time of the investigation, the investigators only had what the medical examiner told them. And I don't remember for certain, I don't know way back when, if dog bite, it happened in the house at Fairview Road, was even a consideration. Because the medical examiner delineates the injuries, delineates the mechanism and the determination of death and how it occurred. And they put that together for a scenario, okay? So if the house was not involved, based on the experts and the guidance and the forensics and everything that they had at the time of the incident, you can't Monday morning quarterback. I mean, you can Monday morning quarterback years later. But it's what the reasonable officer knew and had available to them at the time. Okay? Key difference. On scene during the time, further investigation pending trial, and appeal and civil suit. Okay? all different points in time. Have you ever had something happen and you thought one thing at a time, and then later you're like, oh my God, I wish I knew that or whatever, right? Okay, so um, we're not saying anybody was right or wrong. We have to put ourselves in the shoes of of the person at the time and what they knew and what they had exposure to and what information they had to go on. Again, nobody's right, nobody's wrong. We're just saying, okay? So if with this dog, the German Shepherd, if nobody said to them, if the medical examiner didn't say these look like dog bites, and no other investigator on the team said, hey, do those look like dog bites? Okay. Where's the dog? Oh, the dog's in that. Okay, right? Because it could have been another dog. It could have been a dog in the neighborhood. It could have been a coyote in the neighborhood. I mean, whatever. But I'm just saying, we have to go back, and you have to. It's easy now to see everything and have, what do they say? Hindsight is 2020, right? So it's easy to go back and say that. So we're just talking about all these things that she's going to have to support. So they say, nor did Proctor, Buchanan, or their MSP colleagues conduct any physical examination of the house, defendants, those are those people, or attempt to seize their phones. So again, were they part of the incident or were they not part of the incident? She's going to have to show that. The investigators did not attempt to secure the crime scene, document evidence, collect biological material, videotape or record interviews, take DNA control samples, geolocate digital devices at the scene. Now that would have been interesting. Collect electronic devices, secure surveillance footage, create a crime scene log, that's bad, or maintain even the most basic chains of custody in accordance with well-established investigative protocol. Worse yet, she says, with the help of others at both MSP and CPD, Proctor and Buchanan manufactured evidence to ensure that Miss Reed was blamed for Mr. O'Keefe's death, intentionally diverting attention away from Proctor's friends and fellow law enforcement officers. Okay, I don't know what manufactured evidence there was. If you guys know offhand, comment, but I'm not sure. Well, here we go. I see the next sentence. This included planting evidence at the scene on Mr. O'Keefe's clothes and on Miss Reed's vehicle to support the House defendant's false narrative that Miss Reed struck Mr. O'Keefe with her vehicle, notwithstanding that the investigators knew Mr. O'Keefe's injuries were inconsistent, there's our italics, with a motor vehicle strike and consistent, italics, with a physical altercation and dog attack. I got nothing there. Among other failures, MSP and CPD's delegation of power and authority to those as biased, corrupt, and bigoted as Procter & Gamble led Miss Reed's being wrongly accused of homicide for 3.5 years and subjected to suspicion, to arrest, to prosecution, to public trials, and public condemnation. That's the negligent supervision. That should be the negligent retention. But indeed, with the exercise of ordinary care, both MSP and CPD would have known that Proctor, Goode, and others were unfit for service from the beginning. That's the negligent hiring. Incredibly, Proctor himself acknowledged this fact in 2017 after 4 years on the job, telling his friends, quote, "No idea how I passed the background," end quote. Well, we should see his background in this file. It should be readily available. I don't know. Let's see what's on there. What were the standards at the time? Now, after being twice, in parentheses, acquitted of all charges relating to Mr. O'Keefe's death, Miss Reed brings this action to recover for and address MSP and CPD's actions, inactions, and negligent failures to ensure that justice was sought and served in the aftermath of January 29th, 2022. To be clear, however, this complaint transcends Miss Reed's personal and actionable grievance. Rather, it is a clarion call for reform and accountability. So they're saying this is just not Miss Reed's redress, but it's more broad for reform and accountability. Okay. Cloaked with the emblem of authority, MSP and CPD, their employees, Proctor Goode and others, betrayed their sworn commitment to uphold the law. Okay? Their prejudices undermine our very democratic principles in wielding the great force of government over those who are vulnerable and powerless. MSP and CPD's cultures of intolerance, hidden from the public, but in plain sight within these organizations, cannot stand unchallenged. MSP and CPD are culpable and must confront the consequences of their institutional negligence. So, we have so many different moving pieces here because we have the rules of the organization, we have the officer's individual civil rights, First Amendment, beliefs and all that. We've got the procedures in the department. What are they allowed to do as private citizens? What are they restricted to do as public servants? And if there's any malfeasance or bleed over into the governmental authority and actions as police officers, did it impact negligently Miss Reed's case or the cases of others? And that's what she's going to have to prove here. Okay. Parties: plaintiff Karen Reed is an individual residing in North Dighton, Massachusetts. Defendant MSP is a Commonwealth Department headquartered in Framingham, Massachusetts. Defendant Town of Canton, through the Canton Police Department, is a municipality within the Commonwealth of Massachusetts with a principal place of business in Canton, Massachusetts. The jurisdiction, they're talking about this court where they filed it because it's within Massachusetts. And the venue is proper because the plaintiff resides in Dighton. Okay. So here we have facts, incorporated facts. Reed incorporates by reference each of the facts alleged in paragraphs 28 through 108 of the amended complaint filed in Reed v. Proctor et al. Okay. So there's another case here, Reed v. Proctor. And so what they're saying is that she's establishing facts in this new case through facts 28 through 108 of this amended complaint, as if each were fully stated and alleged here. So we would have to go and look at those facts. Okay, maybe it's attached. It is attached as Exhibit 2. Okay, so that is, let me write that down, 28 to 108. So they're not rewriting them. And then she's got these additional facts, okay? So, Proctor and Goode's ingrained misogyny, racism, homophobia, anti-Semitism, and other biases. By January 29, 2022, Proctor and Goode, both inveterate bigots, had long-standing and deeply held biases against women, as well as almost every other protected class of people other than white, male, non-Jewish police officers. Proctor and Goode's clear willingness and tendency to dehumanize, judge, and evaluate people and circumstances based on their hatred and biases significantly contributed to their willingness to embrace the narrative provided by the House defendants and target Miss Reed, leading to the destruction of her career, her financial stability, and her very freedom, as well as the emotional and physical harm caused by 2 years-long prosecutions and trials for a crime she did not commit. Now, remember when I said, how is their opinions as people affecting their job in the uniform and their cases? She has to prove that. So all that stuff that Karen Reed said these people were, Proctor and Goode, affected, according to her, their embracing the narrative provided by the House defendant. So those were other people involved in the O'Keefe case. And maybe give them preferential treatment or improperly evaluate their credibility, maybe. I don't know, okay, but it says that's what they're saying, that because they carried those biases, they just embraced the narrative of these other people and targeted Miss Reed, okay? It also says Proctor and Goode's reservoir of vituperation, fed by their staggering prejudices and the extent to which they were willing to pass judgment on others solely based on gender, race, religion, or sexual orientation, are apparent from each of their contributions to the cesspool of abject hatred reflected in their group chats and email chains with their friends beginning in 2013. Below is a selection of those messages. So it sounds like, and I don't want to interpret it, I was trying to find this number 2, that she's also saying because they, she's a woman or whatever, the gender, all this other stuff, that, and I'm just trying to use a police word here. I'm not imputing what they said, but I'm trying to give you an example here. So let's just say, which could happen, not talking about this. If you have somebody that's a 20-time convicted felon versus somebody who's never been arrested, let's just say a priest, for example, and maybe that's not a good example, would somebody unfairly judge credibility based on background? Okay. So because Miss Reed is a woman and potentially all this other stuff that they reportedly, allegedly, according to her, thought about her, did they feel she was less credible or more guilty, or were the cops and these other people that were not in these protected classes more credible or less likely to commit the crime? It affected their investigative decision making. Okay. So here we have number 2. It says originally Miss Reed attempted to file all of her affirmative claims against all parties, including the Town of Canton and Mass State Police, in one action she filed in Bristol County Superior Court on November 17, 2025. That pleading contains all of the alleged facts sufficient to establish all the claims against all parties. However, the Town of Canton Police Department and Mass State Police refused to waive the 6-month presentment period. Okay, so there must have been some procedural, technical notice of claim kind of thingy. And so she could not incorporate them in there. She had a waiting period. Okay. So and it says because the Mass State Police enjoys immunity from federal court jurisdiction, because she's got that other federal action we heard about, she cannot add those claims to the pending federal court action. Therefore, she now brings this separately in Bristol County Court, relying on many of the same factual allegations already asserted, rather than set forth those same facts again here. She simply refers to and incorporates them by reference. Okay, so we're going to end this one here. Holy goodness, we've got some messages here. We are on page 10 of 87, and we're going to continue to take a look at this. I really, 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 I hope you find this educational. I hope you find this interesting. This is obviously a case that is definitely in the news. It was very well followed. And who knows what to think. Everybody has their opinion. And again, I'm trying to do my job and present all sides from all parties, from a police supervisor, from a police expert, from a defense expert, from a civil paralegal, from, right? All these different perspectives and especially having worn the uniform and having been in this position to make this determination of, when can you have your feelings and when can you have your opinions? And can she support her case? I think it's very interesting. So if you like it, I love having you here. Thank you for everybody that has liked, subscribed, and shared. I'm doing my best to get to 1,000 members. So if you would subscribe, I really would appreciate it. My goal with this channel is not only to educate and to have fun. I enjoy looking at these court cases, but to help us further justice and to help me do what I want to do is to identify suspects and identify unknown human remains cases across the United States. And this is just a little part of it. So thank you for being here, and I will see you on the next one.